Then we get to like our late 20s, 30s, 40s and think, who on earth am I? I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm burnt out. I'm living a life that feels like it's not meant to me. But then when we don't look at the wider societal view, it's very easy to turn that on yourself and be like, what's wrong with me? What have I done?
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. What if the change that we all need so badly for a better world won't come in a flash of lightning, but in a much slower unlearning that reconnects us to our humanity and ushers in the dying and death of our old and harmful ways of being? But what if the systems that we're trying to dismantle, what if they've been purposefully created to make us feel like we've got no power or agency, bringing on apathy about the change that we can create? My guest today is here to say that you and we collectively have the power to make meaningful change. Helen Dudzinska is a master intuitive psychology coach who works with both the conscious and the subconscious mind using an evidence-based framework backed by science and psychology. Helen coaches women to lead by being unapologetically themselves, plus works with pioneering organizations who want to embed social responsibility into their core values through human-centered leadership and being a part of the solution to social problems. And today, as Helen and I sit in connection with you, we will explore the slow death that's needed for genuine change. How the unraveling of harmful systems begins not with a mind-led strategy on paper, but with a deep listening within us, a return to ourselves, a reconnection to our body, a simple, hello, dear body, I'm listening. So Helen, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat to you today.
Oh, I am so excited to dive on in. I know how deep our conversation is going to go based upon the conversation we just had before we hit record. So this podcast is all about death and grief, but actually it's all of the ways that death shows up for us on the daily. And for me, alongside obviously sitting with my own grief, there is nothing more present than all of the death and the grief that I see in our world that are ultimately due to quite outdated systems and structures that really do need to go. So you, as someone who really is rooted in driving transformation, I'd love to know, what does the word death mean for you in the context of transformation, leadership, and all of the work that you do out there in the world?
I always say that my work is where coaching meets systems change. And I think that's where my perspective comes from in terms of like the transformation that I want to see, and the way I bring that through my work is going beyond individual change to creating that ripple effect of social change, like out from both internally by doing the internal work, and then how that impacts and changes the systems that we all have to navigate every single day. And so for me, when you ask about like what does death mean for me in terms of like transformation and leadership, it's really kind of accept it that the death of ego almost in our leadership and our current leadership models. And actually that leadership should be about the collective and that wider change and the wider good of society, and that doesn't fall down to just one sector or one person. We all have a role to play in that. So I think like for that question, really, as soon as you said it, all I could think was like, I think it's that death of ego. And our current leadership models, I would argue, really promote that kind of ego-driven leadership. And where my work is much about saying, let's move away from that. Let's move away from what we're conditioned to believe. Let's move away from what we're told we need to be and connect to who we really are and lead from that place in a very human-centered, emotionally intelligent, self-aware, nervous system regulated leadership model.
Oh, I really, really feel that. And I feel that so deeply in that reconnection to our true selves. And tell me, I'm really curious in this, the death of that ego-centered way of leading.
Mm-hmm.
How far away is that ego-centered way of leading from, I guess, our trueness as humanity?
So a lot of the way that I work is work with intuition, and so it's guiding people back to connect with, because our intuitive nature, right? We're all intuitive beings, and our intuition is untainted by our conditioning and what as societal factors and what we've been told about who we're supposed to be. It's our kind of inner wisdom, our inner guidance, our inner teacher, and it's always there just below consciousness. But when we're always in this leadership of like ego driven leadership, we're disconnected from who we really are. We're not leading from that intuitive place, we're leading from our conditioned place. And so my work is really about kind of bringing people back to that, in our intuitive nature. And I think, and actually once you do, because I've experienced it on myself and all the people that I work with, it's not, when you're willing, it's not that hard to get back to that place, right? Because there's ways that I have a diploma in intuitive psychology, that it was science and evidence-backed ways where we can regularly access our intuition and drop below our conditioning to like lead from that place. The challenge, I think, is in the willingness to do that, work. And that, I think that, because I think we live in a society where, intuition, that's a bit woo-woo.
Yes.
That's not intuition and leadership. Oh, that's for like spiritual gurus. And so I think the challenge for me about in terms of how far away from me is how can we shifting that narrative, and moving the models and moving the way that we think to be more accepting of that. But I think actually doing it is more than possible. I think it's shifting that mental model that underpins us not doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense when you talk about the conditioning. And I could imagine that there's so much conditioning that obviously it's conditioning to keep us away from that inner wisdom, that intuition, that truth, isn't it? So that's when we start to unpack those layers of our systems and structures.
Exactly. I think that's it. And there's so many systems and structures in the way that we live that profit and benefit from us being disconnected from our inner wisdom.
Yes.
So you're working against like challenging that there's these dominant forces in our society that you're working against, people who profit from us being disconnected from our intuitive wisdom. And so it's on that bigger macro scale of like shifting those mental models and shifting the way that we do things. And I think we do all have the power to do that. I think the more of us who are challenging that narrative and actually doing the work to be a bit more like, actually, this stuff doesn't belong to me. These thoughts, these values, these even my behavior, this doesn't reflect who I really am. And the more of us that are doing the work to disconnect from that conditioning and be more intuitive and lead from that place, that plants those seeds of change to be able to start to shift those models. Because one of my things is like, we have more agency than we've been led to believe. And I think you can see the scale of social problems. You can see the how far are we away from being moving away from that ego-led model of leadership. And you can see how far we are. I'm not denying how far away we are, but that doesn't mean that we can't plant those seeds of change as individuals, by the more of us who are connected to who we really are and saying, actually, no, this stuff doesn't belong to me, and starting behaving from that place. And that's how we shift things. That's how we plant those seeds of change. And when we realize that we have more agency than we've been led to believe. Absolutely. And the more of us doing the work, the better, I think.
Oh, that's so powerful. And this goes into the podcast that we basically had before we hit record.
Yeah.
About the education system. This goes all the way back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, and obviously I know you know her very, very well from your studies. When Jill, I remembered who I was talking about with on the podcast. It was Jill Ritchie.
Yay.
And about how it even goes back, not even to school, but actually to when we're babies in arms or even babies in the womb. There is conditioning there through all of our society and structures to not listen to ourselves. So I'd love to hear your reflections on just how far we've gone wrong, big question, but also how we can start on that path to reconnect. Because obviously, as you shared, that's how we can each have our own individual ripple effect.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's it. I think one of the things that I get a bit frustrated about, I guess, in the coaching and wellness industry is us taking kind of that individual view of like, well, heal our own trauma, heal our own, and change our own beliefs. And I 100%, like, I'm not taking away from that. It's so important. And of course, our individual experiences shape our lives. But I think actually there's such the wider perspective of like the societal values, the societal norms, the dominant social narratives that we all exist within, they shape us just as much. And then we have structural systems such as the education system, the healthcare, the social care system, that then reinforce that conditioning in a real structural way, in the way it's set up. And I think, to go to that point that we're born as babies, right? We are born intuitive, but then as we get older, we kind of twist ourselves, and because we choose attachment because we need it for survival. So we choose attachment to our caregivers and become who our caregivers need us to be. But we also do that from a societal level. So like we become who society tell us that we need to be. And to go to your point when you start talking about the education system, that absolutely starts when we're young and we become part of who the education system, who our teachers need us to be, that we need to achieve by passing our exams. We need to conform and we need to behave in certain ways in a school setting, and it teaches us like what's acceptable, and we mold ourselves to become those things. And I think the more that we can do the work to reconnect to who we really are intuitively, we can move away from those systems.
Oh my goodness, I love that so much, because actually, as you were speaking, I was connecting into all of everybody else's boxes that were expected to fit into through our life. I was connecting into my own journey, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, there are the boxes from my parents, there are the boxes from my school, there's the boxes from when I went to uni and went into that system. But it's no surprise that we at some point we do come out and look at or some people, they maybe never meet that point. It's no surprise that there's so many of us who feel so disconnected from ourselves, and that we have moments, a bit like I had when I just turned around when I was working Formula One and was like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? This doesn't really, truly, at the core, bring me the joy and purpose that I was kidding myself because I was fitting into certain societal boxes and telling myself that it did. So, and then to your point as well, there's the broader picture of our whole society and what that does, I guess, to us conforming into the systems and structures that ultimately do need to die in a lot of ways.
Exactly. And I think that's it. The way that I think there's such a level of apathy, and so many of us have those experiences, don't we, where we get to our late 20s, 30s, 40s, and we're like, what's happened? Like, who even am I anymore?
Yes.
And then when and of course we do, because we've conformed for our whole life unconsciously, essentially, to both for what our caregivers want and the wider systems. And we didn't do that consciously. That's just how we operate as humans, right? And so then we get to like our late 20s, 30s, 40s and think, who on earth am I? I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm burnt out. I'm living a life that feels like it's not meant to me. But then when we don't look at the wider societal view, it's very easy to turn that on yourself and be like, what's wrong with me? What have I done? Like, why can't I cope in this situation? Why am I exhausted? And you're like, well, you're not broken. The system's broken. And we're only taking an individual view. We're not looking at actually the root of this is that we're operating in these dysfunctional systems that we need to adapt ourselves to survive. And then instead of going, oh, actually this system that we're operating in is really dysfunctional, let's do things differently and challenge it, we go, okay, so I need some mindset hacks, and I need some productivity tools, and I need some new goals, and then I'll be all right, because then I'll be able to and you're like, no, like you are not broken. You don't need to mindset yourself out of it. You don't need to we need to get to the root of what's really going on by looking at the wider factors that have influenced our lives, and then giving ourselves compassion for that, and not thinking, oh, I'm broken and I need fixing. It's that work then of unlearning that and reconnecting to who we really are, so that then we can navigate those systems differently, so they don't have that impact on us. And now we can make different choices, because now we're consciously aware of what's going on. We can go, actually, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to take this action, or I'm going to do this differently. I am not the problem. And when I work with women, you can literally see the relief on their faces. They're like, it's like the shame dissipates, that pressure dissipates. It's like, oh, I wasn't broken all along. And I was like, no, you definitely were not broken. You have been acting very understandably and normally and adapting to the systems that you're having to navigate. And now it's time to unlearn that and carve a new path that feels authentic and right for you. And that shame and that pressure just lifts.
Wow. I am not the problem. I think that's so powerful to realize that, because you're right. A lot of the stuff that's out there, just, add this mindfulness in, add these practices in, do this little bit that maybe is also, there's a lot of stuff as well that's quite bypassy or whatever. It's just sticking a plaster over it. And to your point, unless you go to the root cause, then it's a bit like, I don't know, if you're not drinking enough water and you keep getting dehydrated. I'm thinking of myself as a kid, can go back to school and not drinking enough water. I always used to have headaches. But just taking that paracetamol every single time wasn't getting to the root cause of, I need to drink more water. And I need to go right down to that root of what do I need in any one moment. And when you share about unlearning as well, I could imagine that could bring up a lot, because even when we bring awareness to the fact that actually this structure that I'm in is uncomfortable and there is harm that it brings, we've grown up in these systems and structures. So, what does that bring up in us when it comes to that, our own unlearning, our own letting go of that which doesn't serve us? But can it be quite a conflicting space for us to sit in?
Yeah, so I talk about it like, oh, we need to unlearn it. And I think when you hear someone say that, it sounds relatively simple, but it's so not, because it's complex, it's uncomfortable, it brings up like visceral discomfort in our bodies to learn that. And then that's why we work with our nervous system, and a lot of the work I do is to create, because ultimately what you realize is that you've been operating in what feels on some level unsafe systems, and you've adapted to make yourself feel safe, which is understandable. And so what we can do is to manage that, and to help us to move through that discomfort, is to create that safety internally for ourselves. So by understanding what our needs are, working with our nervous system, not regulating our nervous system so we can tolerate the discomfort, regulating our nervous system and working with our nervous system to create that internal sense of safety for ourselves. Because when we do that, that's where the power lies, because then you're like, I don't need to one way that a lot of women that I work with, and myself included, is like, okay, if I'm really nice to everybody else and everyone else's needs get met, that means I'm a good person, so I feel safe. Because we've learned that's our conditioning as women. We get taught from a young age that you give to everyone else and you're a caregiver. And so if you want to move away from those behaviors, you need to create a new way to feel safe. Right.
Yeah.
So that's when we work with our nervous system, because that can, if you just take that, what is essentially a survival strategy, if you take that away without replacing it with something else that makes you feel safe, you're just left adrift. And that's when there's that conflict, and it can feel really, really difficult. So what we do is we work to create that internal sense of safety, so you can meet that need for yourself. You're not externalizing it anymore. You're meeting it for yourself through regulating your nervous system, meeting your own needs, understanding who you really are, and then taking different action.
Yeah, exactly that powerful awareness that comes, but it can
Mm.
only come from that space when we are looking within and supporting ourselves.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is really, really powerful is when we look after our nervous system, when we relearn stuff that we should have learned since we were children. It's also, for me, in that awareness, I've found that there's been that ever expanding. It's almost like I've found it a slow awakening. People often talk about awakenings like it's a light bulb, but actually with that slow exploration and expansion, I find that deepening understanding of myself, but also of the opportunities that there are out in the world. So if I chart my path from corporate into a very new way of life, and a very new way as well of me being super aware and honoring myself, which continues. I believe it's a whole lifetime of unlearning, with the hope that for my future children as well, as they grow alongside me, that they will witness and that will also support them. And there'll be a lot of stuff that I won't pass on to them. But it doesn't all come at once. It's not like, I suppose the traditional coaching model is like, here's a vision, we'll vision towards it, then we'll go towards it. But actually for me, a lot of this is in the reimagining, and understanding what could a new way of being
Mm.
be. There's a lot of gaps. There's
Yeah.
a lot of just that gentle opening and awakening, as well as you shared, the compassion we need to have.
Because you're working against years and years, a lifetime of conditioning that's told you should do it a different way. So it's not like you just wake up tomorrow and you just do it. I agree with you. It's a lifetime of unlearning, doing things differently, working with our nervous system, and really kind of trying things out and starting to learn about yourself, like about who you really are. And I think when we were talking about like your future children and how we leave things, I think for me, the biggest part of doing this work and the biggest motivator is that actually, by the more of us that do this, and we're not propping up the dysfunctional systems anymore that ultimately our children, our children's children will inherit. And I think the more of us now who, instead of saying, oh, actually, I need to mindset my way out of this, and I need to be more productive so I can absorb more and more and more, the more of us are saying, actually, no, this doesn't work for me. I'm exhausted because what I'm being demanded of me is way too much. The more of us are going, actually, I'm not the problem. The system's the
Yes.
problem, and saying, this is not okay, and doing things our own way. And ultimately, so challenging those systems if you want to. I'm not saying everybody needs to turn into a big activist. You can do that in your own way by going, I'm not subscribing to this anymore. That's enough. But there is also tools that we can use within our workplaces, within our life, to go, actually, if I can see these systemic inequalities, there is things we can do to start to affect change on a wider scale as well. And I think the more of it, for me, that's the biggest motivator of doing that kind of unlearning, that internal work, is that the world that our children inherit, we haven't propped up those dysfunctional systems. We've challenged them, and that over time creates change.
That's so beautiful. And I think there's a real, as you shared, there's a real simplicity in our ripple effect of us coming with that understanding and awareness, but also showing up in authenticity of it, whether that's to set a boundary. And it never fails to amaze me how unboundaried we are in this world. But that potential ripple effect, if you've got 10 people in your team, and you show up and you communicate, this is my boundary is that I am uncontactable at this time. Even that, in the most simplest of actions, can create a massive ripple effect, because then when those people are themselves managers, leadership, etc., if they have felt that inspiration and they then take that forwards, you then think how that then compounds across a whole society of people.
It's huge. And I think that I was just posting on Instagram, I've got a post I'm going to send out. It's like individual change doesn't have to be individualistic.
Yes.
I think we live in such an individualistic, like, oh, we're all pitted against each other and we need competition. And so that we think, oh, well, we change ourselves so I can get more, I can do more things. But it doesn't need to be like that. It's actually, it's creating that ripple. It's systemic, right? It's creating that ripple effect of change. You only have to change one aspect of your behavior, and that impacts how hundreds of other people potentially at work, in your family, your children, your life. It creates that wider ripple effect of change. It doesn't have to be an individualistic experience. It can affect that. It can plant those seeds of change. So my background, before I started my business, I worked in the public sector, I worked in charities, I worked in local government, and most recently, before I started my business, I worked for a large children's charity, and my job was called systems change lead. So I was helping them move from a model of providing just individual services, so say for young people who had been trafficked across county lines. We would get 10 young people through our services, we would help those 10 young people, and then we would move them on. And then we'd get another 10 young people through who had very, very similar problems, because those problems, we weren't addressing the root of those problems, right? We were just sticking a plaster over, helping those 10 people moving on. We weren't addressing why they were in this position in the first place, what had happened within the education system, how they'd been treated by the police, and taking that more systemic view. And so my role was to help move the organization from just looking at the individual to addressing the systemic. And that's the power of doing that work, right? So the ripple effect of that is one of the motivating factors of doing that is you can help hundreds more young people than you could ever wish to help by working one-to-one, because you're shifting the system, you're shifting the models, you get into the root cause. I'll never meet all the hundreds of young people that actually me working with the police to change their perspective on young people. Like the ripple effect, and that was a kind of not a long analogy, but that's I think that's the power of the ripple effect of change, that you only have to modify one behavior or one way of working or change one person's mindset, and the ripple effect of that is huge, and it'll impact more people than you could ever wish to meet individually.
Wow, you only have to modify that one behavior going to that route. Oh, I'm feeling that. That's such a powerful story and example. So I'm really intrigued, because now I'm thinking to our society, this is such a big question. We'd have to answer everything. But actually, if you look out to society and everything that you're seeing, obviously we can't answer everything. And for me, actually, that's where I'm really passionate in this space of we can each be change makers in our own way. It's about understanding, what is that? What is that, as you share, the root, that behavior or something that we can affect change in through how we show up as well as our work, etc. If you think about within your work or just even wider in society, if there was one behavior that you think, actually, if we could get to the root of this collectively, that would make a seismic. And obviously I appreciate there's many across the world, but what's one example of something that you're just seeing out there in probably most of us and how we move through the world, where if we could all focus our energies in on that, it could really change the course of humanity?
So the one thing so it's not necessarily like a behavior maybe in the way that you're thinking, but something that is on my mind and I'm talking about a lot at the moment is apathy. And I think if as a society we became less apathetic and thought and realized that we, like I was saying before, that we have more agency than we have led to believe.
Wow.
Actually, that would hugely shift things. So my upbringing was quite political, right? So my dad was in the Labour Party. He was a Labour councillor for a while. I lived in like a Yorkshire mining town, and I remember getting taken on my dad's shoulders, like to the miners' strikes and stuff, so it kind of was part of my, and what I saw growing up, and I studied this at university as well, is like when you have movements, so where you have collective communities who work together to go, this is not okay, to challenge the status quo, change happens, things happen. And I think, but when we have so much apathy, we're so apathetic to it, and we think we have no power, we have no agencies. Essentially, leaderships and governments can do what they want because they take much more, they're much more scared of big corporations than they are of the people who vote for them. right? But if we became and realized the agency that we do have and could work collectively in communities to create movements, more of us doing so, we can shift things. We can shift things on a wider scale, but we have to realize that we have that agency and that we can form things and we can do things. So I think the one thing that is on my mind a lot at the moment is apathy, and how we can move away from that apathetic belief that we've been taught that we can't do anything about it. You're just one person. Oh, it's just the way it is. That's just the way government is. Oh, I hate politics. And I get it. Like, I totally get it. But you don't have to sign up to a particular political party to realize that you have agency. You know, when capitalism and stuff has worked better, it's because there is movements, grassroots movements that governments want to listen to. But we don't have those as much at the moment because we've become very apathetic. And I think if we could really address that apathy, that would make a huge difference.
Oh, Helen, my brain is whirling now, because also around that apathy and around technology and the way that social media and shopping as well is that all of the, not just to Amazon, although they are obviously the ringleaders in a lot of our consumerist behavior and that numbing that happens, but it's also that from that perspective of there's taking us away from apathy, but also in that, I guess there's also the battle that we're going to have. I'm connecting into this from my own personal battle to put my phone down and get off of threads and my doom scrolling. But it's that as well of understanding that actually, again, our systems and structures, they are built to keep us in that space of numbing, to take us away from standing up and saying, actually, no, this isn't right. So therefore, I'm going to vote with my attention economy, how much time I'm spending on these apps, or my wallet when it comes to Amazon or whatever it is. And I think I am literally speaking as someone where the amount of people I coach where social media always comes in as those numbing and avoidance mechanisms. And I'm still relearning, because again, these things go deep and they're all built on psychology. So they're built on the negative side of psychology to keep us hooked and to stop us from saying, hey, do you know what? This doesn't feel right, what's happening right now. And to your point, I know I have agency if I stand up alongside millions of other people. Then this will change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and it doesn't help that we're all exhausted, because we're all exhausted from navigating the, we all overgive, we're over, toxic productivity that I know our friend Tamu talks about a lot. The more exhausted we all remain, the less we're going to go, oh, actually, this isn't okay, because we're all exhausted, and it's just much easier to scroll on our phones and numb out a bit, because we're all exhausted from this overgiving and toxic productivity all the time. And one of the things, so in my old job, we used to do place-based systems change, right? So there was a model that you would use that if you wanted to create change in a local area, that was always to affect better change for young people. If you want to make the systems in a local area, the first thing you would do is find your allies, right? You would go where the energy is, you would find your partnerships. And it's exactly the same for us. If we want to create change in a society, we need to, the first thing you would do is find your allies, go where the energy is, find people who, because you can't change systems alone. Essentially, yes, you can take individual actions and say no, and I agree, but on that wider scale, that's the first step. And then you create communities, you create movements, you come together, and then you start, there's other things, then I won't bore you with the systems change lesson, but there's other things that you can do to find flex in the system. There's other ways that as a community then you can create change.
I love that you said that. And also, I love that you brought Tamu into it. So Tamu Thomas has also been on this podcast. I will definitely put a link to that episode here. And she's got the most brilliant book as well, Women Who Work Too Much. I mean, if I've got the title right.
It's such
a good book. And actually, when Tamu was on the podcast, she too was talking about that community connection and how that can really galvanize, again, that change. And I think that in this world where we have become so disconnected through the supposedly more connected world of social media and the digital landscape, I think we forget as well that there is real power in that in that human connection and finding those spaces that really do uplift and inspire you around people who, and again, it's not to say that we've all got to be, there's one thing that does frustrate me when there's that expectation that we all have to sort of pile in on these select causes. And it's actually, there is a whole world of issues that we need to tackle. But equally, your people are out there to be able to say, right, where are they in, like, where's my community? Where we can all uplift each other and uplift community together through this work.
100%. And it's that shared energy. Like we literally used to say in our system change, go to where the energy is. Go, because you'd work in a local area and you'd always have people who didn't want to change anything, and they'd be like really difficult ones and wouldn't want to be part of the partnership and would almost deliberately ignore you and try and make things difficult. You want to concentrate on those. You go to where the energy is. Find your community, find your people, and then you work together with those. And eventually, actually, some of those people who didn't want to be involved do get involved because they could see this shared energy. They could see this movement for change happening. It's literally like go to where the energy is.
Oh, I love that. You got me thinking as well. There's the bell curve of adoption of innovation.
Yeah.
And you got me thinking about that, how I think in that, is it called the laggards at the end?
Yes.
But actually it's about finding the innovators, the early adopters, and there'll be the early mainstream. And to your point, the energy, it's always bubbling in that space of people who are really galvanized and really excited.
Yeah.
And I think as well, I loved to your perspective of there's certain people where it's just not worth that investment of energy.
Yeah.
And that's okay. They're not your people right now, but to your point, maybe at some point you see them alongside.
And if they want to get involved, and then great. But you don't need everybody. Or you're not here to then convert those people. You're here to create your own movement and take the action that moves the needle. Take the action that's going to create change. Take the action where you can see that there might be a bit of you start to understand. Okay, this is. Really start to understand the problem, and then you get actually where might there be opportunity, where might there be some flex. You don't need to hit those blockers all the time. You need to go and find your own way of doing it, and we all have the agency to do that if we want to. So that, I think that's the apathy thing. But again, just taking those small individual actions. I'm not here to convert everyone to become an activist, but just to understand that we have agency, and those even taking individual actions in our individual lives, start there. And then if you want to, let's go where the energy is, find the movements and whatever. But even just taking those small actions and unlearning in your own life is massive. I was working with a woman who just started to demand more of a partnership from her husband, who take on the bit. And imagine that's right. So then her daughter now sees that she's like demanding that her husband does more school runs and does more cleaning and takes like the ripple effect that has on her daughter, or when the mates come round. It's they're all planting those seeds of change, that when we realize that they are systemic, you're creating change in the system. You're not propping it up anymore.
That's so powerful. And that's so powerful on an ancestral level, because to the point around her daughter, future grandchildren, great grandchildren, etc. And then obviously again that wider ripple that can be created. And what would you say? So if anyone's tuning in and feeling fired up, anytime I speak to you, I always feel really fired up and like, cool.
It's a word.
So where would you suggest that someone would start this journey of unlearning? So perhaps if someone, let's talk about toxic productivity. And which is so prevalent. And again, thank you so much, Tamu, for all of your work in this space and your brilliant writing. And if we root into, for example, someone who suddenly goes, I need to unlearn toxic productivity, where on earth do we start?
So I think this is where the intuition piece comes in. Instead of trying to go like, where am I, trying to unpick it and make it all complicated, it's going inwards, I think. And there's prompts, like the Intuitive Psychology Association have prompts on their website that you can use free. I also have a free workshop that I can send out to people, which is called Redefining Resilience. But we also go through an intuitive technique as part of that to go inwards, because that's really where the answers lie. So you could academically go, I need to unpick all these behaviors and whatever, but you might be there forever and you'd be exhausted from trying to get rid of the toxic programs, the irony. But actually, when we go inwards and just ask ourselves, what do I, we even just closing down our eyes, taking a few deep breaths, connecting inwards, dropping out of our minds and into our body, and asking ourselves, what do I need? What do I need? And just on and trusting what comes up and honoring that need. And it sounds so simple, but we get so many intuitive insights that come out like that. And the more that we do that, we just nurture the relationship that we have with ourselves and start to meet our own needs. So instead of so like we were saying, over time, that creates that ripple effect. And there's lots of other deeper work that you can do through intuitive psychology and start to unearth some of those patterns and those beliefs that we live in our subconscious and are driving our behavior without us even realizing it. But again, that is just, it's about nurturing and going inwards and nurturing the relationship we have with ourselves, understanding what we need, and then honoring those needs and building. It's a process of building over time rather than trying to outsource and learn more stuff. For me, it's about going inwards.
Go inwards, build over time. What I can feel with that is it's that gentle step in.
Yeah.
And I think that equally to that point, if the simplicity of connection it is very, again, sounds simple. Just being like, hey, body, I am listening.
Yeah, but
to your point, if we don't do that and have those foundations, then when it comes to the deeper work, again, are we going to be able to go so deep if we're still really, really rooted up here?
If you're all in because in the reason why intuitive psychology and the way that I coach works is because you're connecting to your own intuitive wisdom that's untainted by the conditioning. So there's Sarah Gregg, who's the co-founder of intuitive psychology with Jill Ritchie, she always says we can't solve our problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. And I think it's so powerful, because if you want to unpick your toxic positivity and you're doing that from your conscious mind that essentially created the problem in the first place, you're just rearranging what's already exists. You're not getting to the root. You're not dropping below that conditioning. And I think that's where the connecting inwards and understanding ourselves works, because you're not trying to kind of solve. It's like it's not the definition of insanity, like doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. It's dropping out of that level of conditioning and connecting to who we are intuitively. And there's a technique that we use in intuitive psychology called unlayering, and it literally helps you unlayer the conditioning that you've been taught from childhood, from society, and helps you literally unlayer that conditioning.
Wow.
And it just starts with that going inwards. And I think it's such a simple practice to start that anybody can do, is that ask yourself, like, go inwards, what do you need? And then do it. Don't ask yourself what you need and then ignore it, which
I don't have time, too busy today.
Sorry, I'm too busy, I can't do that. Like I say that from telling myself.
I've definitely been there. I've been there. But I got a little practice where I'll ask in co-creation with the tree. I'll just put my hand on a tree and say, I'm listening. And then by the time I get home, even if I've written it down in my notes on my phone, have I bloody forgotten it? And then later I'm like, well, that didn't happen, did it? I'm with you.
That's it. It's the action, the magic happens. You get the insights. You're like, actually, I really need half an hour's peace today. I've got 2 kids, right? I often need half an hour's peace today. So I'm like, I need half an hour, and then I have to carve out that heart, because that strengthens the muscle, because you're showing yourself that this is what I need and my needs are important. So taking that action is where the magic happens. The insight's not enough. You do then have to change. The behavior change needs to come alongside that.
Or taking that, and also having grace and compassion, because again, it's that thing of, this is not about beating ourselves up or putting added stress load on ourselves. Again, speaking from my own experience, where I'm like, well, what happened to that insight? I didn't do anything with it. To then be like, all right, well, 3 days later, I've remembered. So now let me take that action.
Yeah,
And
100%.
move
We don't need another thing to beat ourselves over the head about with.
forward.
It's literally, you've got to remember we are unlearning. We are
Yes.
unlearning years and years and years of conditioning. And of course, that's not going to happen overnight. So when you don't quite take the action or you don't quite do it, that's okay. Don't show yourself compassion. It's understandable. It's normal. We go again. And it's taking our time, and we get to take our time with it.
Or what I'm connecting in really, really powerfully within that is to picture in my mind of like a tree. I've gone to, if we think about transforming the world, again, it's that gentle reminder that I feel like I often need to tell myself when I'm being very impatient with where the world is, that like a tree, it's like an old oak tree. This is a long transformation. And that reminder that yes, some dying and some deaths take some time. I'm thinking about, I'm obsessed with trees when they're between two worlds. You know, when there's a tree where it's kind of mostly dead, but then there's like one branch that you can't even understand because the rest of the trees almost started decaying, like a really ancient tree.
Yeah, wow.
But there's one branch that just still sustains. But that always reminds me that sometimes in death or dying and death, it's a slower transition and transformation, but it's still happening.
Yeah,
there is still that evolution. It's just that when we're watching it and going, all right, what's happening? I'm used to the Netflix version of death.
Yes.
It's just a slower, and it might take decades. I mean, for us with a lot of this toxic productivity, etc., it's going to be beyond our lifetime. It's a transformation that we probably won't see the end of and the full emergence of a new world, but we are all a part of that.
Absolutely. I think it's planting those seeds of change like that. So when, again, in my systems change role, we used to be like, oh, how can you evaluate if the change has happened? Well, the change might take 10 years, but what you can see is those little changes, those incremental changes that happen along the way. It's almost like the destination. It's not irrelevant. Of course, that's important. That's what you want to get to, but it's noticing. It's the noticing and the taking those steps and planting those seeds of change along the way.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that from that perspective of taking away that pressure to see those seeds in full bloom. If we know we've planted those seeds, and then we can water those seeds, tend to those seeds. But if we don't see those seeds blooming in that lifetime, it's that knowing and trusting that those seeds will bloom as and when they're ready. And that's okay.
And that is okay. And knowing, because that fulfillment of knowing that you planted those seeds, that you were part of that journey, like that's really where the fulfillment happens.
Oh, that's so, I think in a results driven world where it's very much like, right, what are my goals, my key KPIs, etc. And how can we evaluate and analyze? There's certain things where you're like, no, we don't really need to. Same with our ripple effect. I was actually talking about this with a client who works in the NHS. And I said to her, have you ever connected into just how many people you will have helped in your whole time working in the NHS? Not just people directly, but their family, etc. And when she connected in, she suddenly was like, oh my goodness. She was like, my mind is blown with this, because we couldn't even quantify it. And again, it's that simplicity of if we show up in kindness, connection, compassion for ourselves and for others, that in itself, what a massive ripple effect. We will never, ever know that person who maybe we were kind to at a train station where we just cracked their shell a little bit and they then acted a little bit differently in their life or whatever it is. No idea.
Yeah,
we'll never know.
Exactly that. And like there's lots of research about the psychology of happiness and and there's even within that, psychologists have studied that the destination isn't what makes us happy. Like we're taught this definition of happiness that when we, I don't know, get a bigger car or we get the house or we have the relationship, then we'll be happy. But actually, and I know most of my clients and myself, it's when you reach that destination, you're like, oh, okay, what about the next thing? What about the next thing? Because actually that isn't what makes us happy. It's what makes us happy is wanting to, we can want for other things, we can want for change, but it's aligning our thoughts and our actions and our behaviors behind what we want, and then noticing that we're doing that on the way. That is what true fulfillment and true happiness. I work with this on some of my
Wow.
with my clients in that way, to access what our flow state, and that's actually what makes us happy, not the destination. And so you can look at that on the bigger scale, on the systems change and what we used to, you know, in that sense of knowing. You don't have to evaluate that we've created that change. It's aligning our actions and our behaviors behind that, and noticing that we're doing that along the way. And that's where we get to feel fulfillment now, not when we've achieved the external destination.
Wow. I love that. We can feel that fulfillment now. Now, I wanted to ask you, before I come flowing into our final question, because I feel like this is a really good space to connect into hope and joy and optimism. Because again, in this space, I think that there's a lot that's going on in the world that can feel and is catastrophic and devastating and horrendous. But equally, again, to the point of apathy, I worry that when there's so much that is so traumatic that we are witnessing, and then also that which we are also experiencing in life, that actually that can also that can create a disconnect. So I really believe in us connecting into the hope, the optimism, the joy that is present in this journey to a better world. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you connect into in this space that brings you hope?
Do you know what? I really curate my Instagram feed, my news, everything, to create, not that I ignore the external, like I know a lot about what's going on in the external world, but I know because I, you know, there's lots of things I want to do to try and create change into. I deliberately create things that show me that good people exist, change is happening, and so I can notice those glimmers along the way. So I deliberately follow people on social media who are being part of the change, because that brings me fulfillment. Because I'm like, okay, these people are part of this, I'm part of this, and we're planting those seeds of change. So I deliberately kind of almost curate my own, not just on Instagram, but like my world, to be connected to people who are part of movements, who are part of the change, who bring joy, because it gives me hope that we're not stuck like this forever. Of course, it's horrific things that are going on in the world, and I don't think we should bypass that in any way. But I think if we just focus on that, like you say, we can begin understandably freeze state, like it's literally a trauma response. And if we're stuck in freeze, it's impossible for us to be taking action and be part of the change. I think it's so important, and the way that I do that is to be connected to people through social media, in my real life, in the news that I watch, who are being part of that change. And I find that really inspiring, because it's like a lot of the problems that are happening in the world are created by a few people in reality, and the impact that has is obviously affecting millions of people, but actually there's also lots of other people who are galvanizing and trying to be part of that change, to challenge the few that are causing the problems in the first place. So for me, I find a lot of joy and inspiration through that connecting into that, to the people who are taking action, who are good and wanting to make the change, and be part of, of challenging the system.
Oh, I love, and that's also challenging the media system.
Yeah,
because the algorithm, big media platforms, even BBC News, etc. It's all built on fear. It's built on a negativity, which obviously stuff that needs to be in the news. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be there, but actually there isn't any kind of positivity bias within that to say, actually, also, to your point, alongside, let's make sure that we're surfacing these big wins for humanity, big wins for the environment, etc. So actually that reinforces, to your point, a state within us that is just, whether it's we get stuck in freeze or any other nervous system activation, that is not potentially gonna help us to take action in a deeply aligned way. So I think that's really powerful as well, from that perspective of like, what's gonna uplift me, and what's also gonna help me to just take a deep breath and see that there is, to your point, there is so much good in the world alongside. So not bypassing the rest, but alongside.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do feel strongly about, you can't bypass it. You can't. I have other friends who are like, I just don't watch the news and I live in my happy little world.
Yeah, I've seen too many coaches say that, and I'm always like, all right, that's lovely if you got privilege to be able to just disconnect from what's happening in the world. I agree.
So I literally feel very strongly against that, but I think there's a way to still be aware but also be part of the community and be in spaces where they're challenging that narrative and they're, you know, being part of the change, not ignoring it, but not just focusing solely on it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I really love that. I can't remember, it was a while back I was subscribing. I need to see if it's still around. It's called Future Crunch, I think, back then. And that was all about positive. So it was only positive stories, but with the very explicit thing of this is to read alongside the rest of the media, because this is what you're not getting in the rest of the media. So I definitely, I feel you when it's that. You're making me think about that curation, because I'm like, actually, there's different platforms. I'm like, okay, Instagram can definitely be my like joy space. And then Threads is the space that I do like to go to get the news in quick sound bites, and then news podcasts. So it's almost like understanding as and when, and understanding that actually for us humans, our nervous systems aren't built to just have 24/7. The news cycle, CNN wasn't it? Was the first one that brought it in, that 24/7 breaking news cycle. We're not built like that. Our nervous system can't take it. So it's about understanding in our day what's the structure to help us to allow for that space to just be like, okay, I can breathe now.
Yes, and you get to choose. I think that's it. You get to choose. When I feel I can actually be in a space where I can read the news, I get to choose. It doesn't just pop up on my Instagram feed and I'm like you get to choose.
Yeah, that's a really big one. I'm going to look at my notifications too. Straight after this, I'm going to have a little structure session. But I'm conscious that we need to bring this conversation to a close. I am in my full determined flow that I knew I was going to be leaving this conversation with. But I've got one question that I always ask of every guest. So we've connected into the transformation needed in our world. We've connected into obviously the space for hope and for joy and for all of the positive things that are also happening. Now let's go back into self and into our personal journey to transformation. I'd love for you to just connect into any past version of yourself. And from where you're sitting today, what are some words of wisdom or just anything that you wish to share with her?
So I was thinking about this earlier, and I would say just slow down, right? So we live in a world where everything's like on to the next thing, and I'm a bit like a puppy. I'm like, oh, life's so exciting, and I'm going to do this, and it's great, and to a degree it served me well. But I was like, just slow down, because that's where the magic happens, and go inwards. Like I used to be like, oh, so woo and you know all this, and I was like, no, but slow down and really like understand myself and trust myself and just do connect inwards, like just literally. And the way is slowing down. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just, you know, just take those few minutes just to breathe, connect with yourself and nurture that relationship where I have with myself from a younger age, where it just didn't even cross my mind. I was just on to the next party, on to the next, you know, and I just be like, just slow down a bit, just slow down.
Oh, that it feels like a message for our times, doesn't it? But for all of us, for the many different aspects of us and us in the past, just I love that. Slow down. That is where the magic happens. I can really root into the simplicity of that.
Yeah.
As you've shared so powerfully through the whole of our conversation, it really is rooted in things that are just as simple as you shared, slowing down and just saying, hey, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What you saying, buddy?
Yeah. What are you telling me?
What are you telling me today?
Yeah.
What's the message? Now, I promise I will take action from this place and not go straight onto Instagram or wherever and start doom scrolling.
Yeah, we'll start scrolling.
Oh, Helen, well, today's conversation and just knowing you and knowing your work, like it's a joy, and I get so inspired by you. I would love, before we close out, for you just to share anything about where anyone tuning in can connect with you, can find out more about your work. You mentioned obviously your free workshop as well, so I can put a link to that in the show notes, but do share anything and everything and I'll make sure it's all linked as well.
Yeah, so I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I'm Helen Dudzinska on there. So please come and find me. I work one-to-one with women to help them develop that relationship with self, remove their, step away from that conditioning using intuitive psychology. And I run a leadership program called Lead Out Loud, where once you've done the inner work, if there are systemic things you want to challenge, say within your workplace, within your leadership, I can work with you to give you tools to be able to affect some of that change. I also work with organizations who want to be part of the solution to social problems. So by running human-centered leadership coaching programs, but also consultancy. And I basically I do an audit for organizations, whether you're a small business or or a bigger organization, to look at how can you become more systemically informed at the different levels of the system and genuinely be a part of the solution to social problems. But yeah, I'll Tanya, I'm sure, will put my website and check me out on social media.
I just want to say just how important the work that you're doing is, and also the hot takes that I see on your social media that I absolutely love.
Oh.
So I would definitely say, yeah, get Helen in your orbit. And for anyone who perhaps is just tuning into this and thinking, oh my goodness, this feels really big and really overwhelming, again, just remember that simplicity of everything that Helen shared. It is just, I get that there is it's that reconnection to us as humans.
Yeah.
And actually, as we move through to a better world, the beauty is that is such a true transformation of ourselves. And it is difficult in many parts, but actually, in my experience, it's such an enriching journey that only just every up level and every time of that unlearning just feels like it gets better and better.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're in the midst of the discomfort, there's so much freedom and so much joy and to be had on the other side. And even as part of the journey, it can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be simple, and it can be supportive, and it can be nourishing. And you get to do it in your own time. I think when we look at the external, and we look at the destination, and we look at the scale of the problems, it can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't need to be that way. You can get to take your time so that you can see it through.
Oh, powerful words to close with. So Helen, hand on my heart, I am just so grateful to you for joining me today, for inspiring me. I'm moving forwards with determination and to really listen to myself today. So thank you so much for joining me on Death on the Daily.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something